Driving from Toronto to Los Angeles, I decided to take my time and not go the fastest route, which was fine with my co-driver Sheldon. This gave us an opportunity to visit parts of America I'd only ever heard about and never imagined visiting. Our first stop was in Chicago, where we stayed with distant relatives who gave us a quick tour of the city the next day before we moved on. In Des Moines, Iowa, we stopped to fill up with petrol, or gas, and apparently just missed a huge hailstorm. The owner of the small gas station showed us a hailstone the size of a tennis ball, which he'd kept in his freezer. He then pointed out cars close by that had huge dents in their bodywork as a result of the violent pounding of the hailstones. "Tornado's coming next," he said. "You better get going." We'd originally thought of staying there overnight, but with a tornado warning from the mouth of a local, we changed our minds. We'd driven a few miles out of Des Moines and was on the road towards Nebraska, driving in torrential rain, when I looked in my rearview mirror and saw in the distance a large, terrifying spiral shape in the sky. This was the predicted tornado, which we were very glad to be driving away from. And both Sheldon and I said a prayer for the safety of the man in the gas station, as well as other residents in the state of Iowa. I'd always wanted to see Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, so that was our next stop after Nebraska. It was one of those wow moments, seeing the enormous sculpted faces of 4 US presidents carved into the Black Hills. This colossal memorial to Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt was beyond anything I could have imagined. It was breathtaking, truly remarkable. What a work of art. We then went on to Wyoming, where we stayed overnight near the Devil's Tower National Monument, a large rock structure which was shown in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was quite eerie, actually, and I knew why it had been chosen for the sci-fi film. Passing through Cheyenne, we definitely got the feeling that we'd landed in the wild, wild West, and expected to see cowboys and Indians on horseback around every turn. We did actually see a few guys wearing cowboy hats, although they didn't really look like gunslingers. Colorado was beautiful. The sky's so clear and the air really fresh. We drove for miles along glorious mountain roads, stopping overnight in Utah near Zion National Park. Even though we would have liked to explore that area, we were kind of getting anxious to reach Vegas. We had not, however, anticipated how very hot the next part of our journey would be through Death Valley. How we longed for the fresh, clean and cool air of the Colorado mountains instead of the dry, hot desert. It was brutal. But we made it to Vegas, where Sheldon and I parted. He'd been a good travel companion, for which I was very grateful. I arrived in Los Angeles the next day and drove to Torrance in the South Bay, where I stayed with a friend. Within a few days, though, I'd found a studio apartment not far from my friend, and during the next 6 months I tried to get my own business, Canadian Connection, off the ground, with the help of a fellow Canadian, Diane. At that time, many American film producers were going to Canada to make films because of the very lucrative tax credit that was available there. The point of my company was to provide these producers with information on Canadian creative talent, locations, studio facilities, and all aspects of film production. Since a Canadian film office didn't exist in Los Angeles, I'd approached several film organizations in Canada for funding to create such an office. But they were not forthcoming at all. I didn't think it was necessary. So I was on my own, with eventually the help of Diane, who'd lived in LA for a number of years and had contacts, another word for gold in the film industry. We had a great office in a wonderful complex in the heart of Hollywood, ironically called Crossroads of the World, which was occupied by all kinds of creative talent, including music producers, screenwriters, costume designers, and casting agents. We had a few meetings with potential clients, but it was tough going. And it soon became clear that they wanted information but didn't want to pay for it. Of course, I understood that. And then, wouldn't you know it, 2 years later, a Canada film office was opened in Beverly Hills. I guess I was ahead of my time. It was very annoying. With the sudden breakup of Diane's marriage and my severely depleted savings, I decided to look into the possibility of getting a job as a unit production manager in television. To that end, I had a meeting with the people over at The Tonight Show. The host at that time was Johnny Carson. Although I wasn't necessarily a fan, he and his show were held in high regard, and I knew this would be a big deal for me. A new friend, Bob, was kind enough to take me to the NBC lot, and I have to say, it was quite a thrill to be entering the world of American television, to walk onto the sound stages and down the corridors where so many famous people had been before me. The meeting with the Carson people went well enough, and they were courteous and encouraging, but it was clear that the kind of job I was looking for was hard to get. Then there was the obvious issue that I was from Canada and didn't have the proper papers to work in the States. I'd fortunately obtained a legitimate social security number, which was necessary in order to open a bank account. As fate would have it, the card wasn't stamped for banking purposes only, not for work, which meant that I could work and pay taxes. So I really got lucky. Or I like to think one of my angels was looking out for me. Of course, there was always the issue of the necessary work visa or green card, which I didn't have, but I chose to ignore that hurdle until it appeared. Undaunted, I met with one of the producers of the TV show MASH, who was also most encouraging, which I soon learned was the American way, or at least it was in Hollywood. There's a sense of optimism and enthusiasm, and although often unrealistic, it buoys the spirits and gives one hope and the feeling that anything is possible. I was also delighted to spend time on the set with the cast of MASH, and particularly Alan Alda, who was a very gracious person. So many actors are self-absorbed, an occupational hazard, I think. But Alan Alda was very interested in who I was and wanted to know what my ambitions were and so forth. I had a similar experience on the set of Happy Days. I was introduced to Henry Winkler by a Toronto friend who'd gone to college with Henry. The Fonz was very warm and inviting as he introduced me to the rest of the cast of Happy Days, including 20-something Ron Howard. A couple of months later, without a TV job or a green card in hand, I answered a newspaper ad reading, "Head of studio looking for an assistant." This turned out to be Samuel Goldwyn Jr. I was so excited driving through the gates of the Warner Hollywood Studios, previously the Samuel Goldwyn Studios, for my interview. I imagined all the famous people who'd gone before me, the likes of Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra, Sir Laurence Olivier, Gary Cooper, Humphrey Bogart, and pretty much most of the Hollywood stars of the 40s and 50s who'd appeared in films produced by the late and iconic Samuel Goldwyn. I parked my car and looked for the building where I was to have my interview for the job of personal assistant to Samuel Goldwyn Jr. I passed a group of actors who were standing at a food truck, and I recognised the very distinctive voice of Joan Collins, who had her hair in curlers, pre her magnificent wigs that she wears today, as she was collecting her coffee. Apparently the television series Dynasty or Dynasty was being filmed on the lot. Walking into the offices of the Samuel Goldwyn Company, I had a feeling in my gut that this was the beginning of my Hollywood career, and we should always follow our instincts. They never lie. Next time, Samuel Goldwyn leads to David Guest and the American Cinema Awards. Thanks for listening.